might just record this so it's a slightly wider audience. Try that. I wish to begin by acknowledging that we gather on the land of the Pambalong clan of the Awabakal Nation, and in this place I especially acknowledge the wise ones of the past. I seek the counsel of their descendants in the present and commit myself to walking together with them into the future. We are here today because of one little word, and that word is illegal. The concept of illegality is the great lie on which the mistreatment of refugees is based. The Howard government introduced the term illegal maritime arrivals. Scott Morrison reintroduced it along with a further change in language. Asylum seekers were clients, and then they became detainees. So we moved from the idea of vulnerable human beings fleeing persecution to a hoped-for sanctuary, to these very same people being seen as criminals who were rightly and justifiably incarcerated. How did we allow ourselves to become so manipulated? We then find ourselves willingly surrendering our hard-earned income tax to the tune of over $10 billion per year to support Operation Sovereign Borders. An operation that has absolutely nothing to do with border security and everything to do with government propaganda. This operation is costing 3 times the UNHCR budget for 60 million refugees. This operation is incarcerating men, women and children in indefinite detention in inhumane conditions while denying their human rights. And just in case this lie was challenged, it would be supported by another lie, that this measure was necessary to stop people from drowning. All this policy ever achieved was to ensure that people drowned somewhere else. So why is it? One of the apocryphal stories from the Watergate scandal concerning the Washington Post reporter Bob Woodward was told by his informant to follow the money. It's not bad advice, but I would also want to add to follow the power. There is no doubt that in a political climate where people have bought the lie and are feeling afraid of an imaginary threat, it is easy to gain political power by promising to protect them by securing our borders. Both sides of politics have contributed to this lie, and both are now trapped in its success. But they are trapped in a policy that will ultimately be proven to be economically, socially and politically unsustainable. The question is, who will blink first? I would suggest that with 68% approval rating, Mr Turnbull could afford just a little bit of compassion. If we follow the money, it will lead us to places like Wilson, Serco and Transfield, or now we've moved our name around to Broad Spectrum. Extremely lucrative contracts are being awarded to these companies to manage the basis on which the propaganda has its fabricated foundations. These companies are not bad in themselves. They employ many good, hard-working people in a variety of legitimate enterprises. However, they do collude in the immoral, mandatory and indefinite detention of vulnerable people who have committed no crime, people who are no threat other than to the political manipulation and propaganda. The only way we can help these people is to make mandatory offshore detention politically unsustainable for both Labor and the LNP, and economically unsustainable for companies like Transfield. We achieve both these ends by changing public opinion, and we do that by changing the narrative. The key is always the media. Unfortunately, it is to the media that both the money and power trails sometimes lead. We must not accept the narrative that asylum seekers are illegal. This is a blatant lie. We must not allow the media to get away with peddling this lie. Write letters, send emails, comment on posts, talk to family and friends and strangers, challenge the lie. Lobby advertisers. Make it an embarrassment to be associated with this manipulation. The last thing anyone trying to sell anything wants to be associated with is manipulation. They are, of course, manipulative, but above all else, they do not want to be seen to be manipulative. What would happen if advertisers said, "We don't want our ad to appear on any page that calls asylum seekers illegal"? The lie would have to stand there, naked and exposed for all to see. There are, however, journalists committed to exposing the lie, to shining a light into the darkness of detention centres. And we are blessed to have one of those journalists here with us today, Joanne McCarthy. Share their stories, retweet their posts, nominate them for awards. It sends the message that we are interested in human justice and in human rights. And you know what? The advertisers are only interested in what interests us. Once we have followed the money and found where it lives, we can get the money to follow us. That is true democracy. That is where the power returns to the people. It is the people who are also shareholders of companies like Transfield, and most people don't like to think they are an active party to the oppression of vulnerable people and the denial of human rights. The superannuation funds, the holders of the people's money, are dumping Transfield shares, and their share price is dropping. We can make it economically unviable for this company to continue to collude with the government. A university of all places must be a place that works from an ethical base. Please answer these three questions for me. Is it acceptable for such a place of learning to partner with a company involved in the denial of human rights?
No!
Is it acceptable for such a place of learning to partner with a company who denies transparency on child abuse?
No!
Is it acceptable for such a place of learning to partner with a company who denies justice to victims of violence? No! But before I go any further, I must acknowledge that I belong to an organisation that is guilty of all of these things. Over the past years, we have learnt an enormous amount to our eternal shame. We have learnt this far too late. I am also ashamed that it has taken a Royal Commission to teach us the depth of this human catastrophe and what we needed to do about it. Some of what we have learnt is that where there is inadequate staff recruiting processes and supervision, and where there is a culture of secrecy and a lack of transparent process, sexual, physical and emotional abuse is inevitable. This is clearly the context in which Transfield is required to work by our government policy, and this is the context into which Transfield is prepared to sell itself. That is not the kind of company any university should choose to partner with.
Shame. Shame.
The church can tell Transfield from our own experience the shame and loss of reputation that comes from being called to the Royal Commission. In fact, we have communicated this to Transfield at the very highest level. To date, their media releases would indicate that they have not heeded this warning. If this behaviour of denial continues, shareholders would do well to brace themselves for heavy legal and compensation costs. Institutions like this university would do well to consider the cost to reputation, as would other institutions considering entering into contracts with companies involved in the offshore detention industry. It does not have to be so for government, for this institution, for Transfield, or for us. The choice is ours. We still, for the time being, live in a democracy. And if we are wise, we the people have the power, and if we can find our voice, we can get the money to follow us. Thank you so much.